Welcome to our comprehensive exploration of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, commonly referred to as IBC. This video will guide you through the essential procedures, landmark judgments, and practical implications of the code in India. We'll start by understanding the basic framework and move on to discuss important legal cases that have shaped its interpretation. Whether you're a law student, a professional, or simply curious about insolvency law, this journey will clarify how the IBC operates and why it matters. Let's begin by setting the context for insolvency and bankruptcy in India and how the code aims to streamline resolution processes for debtors and creditors alike. Common question is whether debtors can be imprisoned under the IBC. In India, there are no prisons for debtors, and any such imprisonment would be unconstitutional. However, if a debtor commits fraud related to their debts, such as using fake documents for a loan or misusing funds, they can be prosecuted for fraud. This distinction is crucial. Honest inability to pay does not lead to jail, but fraudulent actions do. The code ensures that only genuine cases of insolvency are addressed, while fraudulent behavior is penalized separately under criminal law. This approach balances protection for debtors with accountability for misconduct. Supreme Court case of Surendra Trading Company vs. Jugal Kamlapat Jute Mills Limited clarified important procedural aspects of the IBC. The question was whether the 14-day period for adjudicating authorities to ascertain default and admit or reject applications is mandatory or directory. The court held that this period is procedural and directory, not mandatory. Similarly, the 7-day period for rectifying defects in applications is also directory. This means that while these timelines are important for expeditious justice, missing them does not automatically invalidate proceedings. The judgment ensures flexibility in the process, allowing for practical realities in insolvency cases. Mobilox Innovations Private Limited vs. Kurusa Software Private Limited, the Supreme Court addressed the conditions required to trigger the IBC for operational creditors. The code requires 3 elements: occurrence of default, delivery of a demand notice for unpaid debt, and non-payment or unsatisfactory reply within 10 days. The court emphasized that these steps are essential for initiating insolvency proceedings. Additionally, the existence of a real dispute must be considered. If a dispute is genuine and not illusory, the application can be rejected. This judgment reinforces the importance of due process and safeguards against frivolous claims. Crucial aspect under Section 9 of the IBC is the confirmation from a financial institution regarding unpaid operational debt. While this information is important for the adjudicating authority, the absence of such a certificate alone does not warrant dismissal of an application. The Supreme Court clarified that applications should not be rejected solely for lack of this certificate if other grounds are valid. This ensures that procedural requirements do not overshadow substantive justice, allowing genuine cases to proceed even if certain documents are missing at the initial stage. Supreme Court interpreted Section 8(2)(a) of the IBC, stating that the word "and" may be read as or to further the statute's objectives and avoid anomalies. This means that if an operational creditor files a complete application, the adjudicating authority must reject it if there is a real dispute or record of dispute. The court clarified that a dispute exists as long as it is genuine, not hypothetical or illusory. This interpretation ensures that the code is applied fairly and prevents misuse by parties seeking to avoid legitimate claims. Alchemist Asset Reconstruction Company Limited vs. Hotel Gaudavan Private Limited, the Supreme Court held that arbitration proceedings cannot be initiated after a moratorium is imposed under Section 14(1)(a) of the IBC. Any arbitration started after the moratorium is considered non-est, meaning it has no legal effect. This ruling protects the interests of stakeholders during insolvency resolution by preventing parallel proceedings that could complicate or undermine the process. The moratorium ensures a focused and orderly resolution, free from external legal distractions. Nikhil Mehta and Sons vs. AMR Infrastructure Limited. Case clarified that purchasers of real estate under an assured return plan are considered financial creditors under the IBC. This means they can initiate insolvency proceedings against builders for non-payment or non-delivery of units. The NCLAT further ruled that such debts qualify as financial debt because they are disbursed against consideration for the time value of money. This judgment expands the scope of financial creditors, offering protection to real estate buyers and ensuring accountability for builders. NCLAT's ruling in the assured return case emphasized that the primary ingredient for an arrangement to qualify as financial debt is the time value of money. If a debt is disbursed against consideration for the time value of money, the lender qualifies as a financial creditor under the IBC. This criterion ensures that only genuine financial relationships are recognized, preventing misuse of the code by parties without legitimate claim. The judgment provides clarity for both lenders and borrowers in structuring their agreements. KS Ragasamy vs. State Bank of India, the Supreme Court observed that if a corporate debtor is ready to pay the total amount with interest, the financial creditor can settle the dispute. If a resolution applicant proposes a lesser amount or more time, the concerned person can approach the appropriate forum to make the settlement absolute. If the promoter's offer is better than the resolution plan, they can seek to have the settlement recorded. This judgment encourages flexible settlements and prioritizes fair outcomes for all parties involved. Indian Overseas Bank vs. Kamineni Steel and Power India Private Limited case addressed the percentage of voting share required to approve a resolution plan. Initially, the code required a 75% vote share, but this was later reduced to 66%. The Hyderabad NCLT clarified that this percentage must be read in conjunction with RBI circulars. The NCLAT struck down an order approving a plan without the mandatory vote share, reinforcing the importance of compliance with statutory requirements. This ensures that resolution plans are endorsed by a substantial majority of creditors. Brilliant Alloys Private Vs. Mr. S. Radhagopal and Ors, the Supreme Court dealt with the withdrawal of corporate insolvency resolution process, CIRP. The application for withdrawal was filed under Section 65 instead of Section 12A after the invitation for expression of interest. The NCLT dismissed the application, citing Regulation 30A, which requires withdrawal applications to be filed before the invitation. This judgment highlights the importance of following procedural rules and the limitations on withdrawal once certain stages are reached in the insolvency process. Sandeep Kumar Gupta Vs. Stewarts and Lloyds of India Limited. Case examined the performance of resolution professionals, RPs. The NCLAT ruled that unsatisfactory performance does not amount to misconduct, but the adjudicating authority can engage another person as RP or liquidator if not satisfied. This ensures accountability and flexibility in appointing professionals, maintaining the integrity of the insolvency process. The judgment empowers authorities to make changes for better outcomes without penalizing professionals for mere dissatisfaction. Shah Bros Ispat PVT Limited Vs. P. Mohan Raj and Ors. The NCLAT clarified that Section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act is a penal provision. Orders of imprisonment or fines under this section are not considered proceedings for money claims or recovery against the corporate debtor. Criminal proceedings are not covered under Section 14 of the IBC, which deals with moratoria. This distinction ensures that criminal liability is separate from insolvency proceedings, protecting the rights of both creditors and debtors. Transmission Corporation of Andhra Pradesh Limited Vs. Equipment Conductors and Cables Limited case involved the NCLAT issuing a threat to settle claims, failing which appropriate orders would be passed. The Supreme Court relied on the Mobilox case, emphasizing that the adjudicating authority must determine whether there is an operational debt exceeding Rs. 1 lakh, whether documentary evidence shows the debt is due and unpaid, and whether a dispute exists. This judgment reinforces the need for thorough examination of claims and evidence before passing orders. State Bank of India Vs. V. Ramakrishnan and Annar. The Supreme Court clarified that the moratorium under Section 14 of the IBC applies only to corporate debtors, not personal guarantors. The adjudicating authority for insolvency resolution and liquidation of both corporate debtors and personal guarantors is the NCLT. This distinction ensures that personal guarantors remain liable even during the moratorium period, protecting creditor interests and maintaining the effectiveness of the insolvency process. Karangol Vs. M.S. Pashupati Jewelers and Annar. Case addressed whether a pending suit can be grounds to reject an application under Section 7 of the IBC. The NCLAT held that pre-existing disputes are not relevant for Section 7 applications, though they may be considered under Section 9. This distinction clarifies the scope of disputes in insolvency proceedings and ensures that applications are not unfairly rejected based on unrelated litigation. Mr. Vineet Khosla Vs. Edelweiss Asset Reconstruction Company Limited. The NCLAT held that at the stage of admission of an application under Section 7, the adjudicating authority is not required to consider whether resolution for the company would be possible or whether it can remain a going concern. This ruling streamlines the admission process, focusing on eligibility rather than future outcomes. It ensures that applications are processed efficiently, without unnecessary delays or speculative considerations. ArcelorMittal India Private Limited Vs. Satish Kumar Gupta and Ors case clarified that the stage of ineligibility attaches when the resolution plan is submitted by resolution applicant, not at any earlier stage. The Supreme Court also held that the 270-day time limit for completion of the insolvency resolution process is mandatory and cannot be extended. This ensures timely resolution and prevents indefinite delays, maintaining the effectiveness of the IBC. Power Finance Corporation Limited Vs. Mahendra Khandawal. The NCLT Hyderabad bench held that the power to replace an interim resolution professional and appoint a new one is solely vested with the Committee of Creditors. The prerequisites include a resolution passed by the COSI with at least 66% voting shares and written consent from the proposed resolution professional. This judgment empowers creditors and ensures that the process remains transparent and accountable. Throughout these judgments, a recurring theme is the procedural flexibility built into the IBC. Courts have consistently interpreted timelines and requirements as directory rather than mandatory, allowing for practical realities in complex insolvency cases. This approach ensures that genuine cases are not dismissed on technical grounds and that the code remains effective in resolving disputes. The flexibility also encourages parties to focus on substantive justice rather than procedural hurdles. Adjudicating authority plays a central role in the IBC process. It is responsible for admitting or rejecting applications, determining the existence of default, and ensuring compliance with procedural requirements. The authority must also consider the existence of genuine disputes and the adequacy of documentary evidence. These responsibilities ensure that the insolvency process is fair, transparent, and efficient, protecting the interests of both creditors and debtors. Committee of Creditors (COSI) is a key decision-making body in the insolvency resolution process. It has the power to approve resolution plans, replace resolution professionals, and make other critical decisions. The COSI operates based on voting shares, with important resolutions requiring a specified majority. This structure ensures that creditors have a direct say in the outcome of insolvency proceedings, aligning interests and promoting accountability. Moratorium under Section 14 of the IBC provides a temporary suspension of certain legal actions against the corporate debtor. This period allows for focused resolution without interference from external proceedings. The moratorium does not apply to personal guarantors or criminal proceedings, ensuring that liability is appropriately distributed. The moratorium is a critical tool for maintaining order and protecting assets during insolvency. IBC distinguishes between operational and financial creditors. Operational creditors are those owed for goods and services, while financial creditors are those who have lent money. The code sets different procedures and requirements for each, ensuring that claims are processed appropriately. This distinction is important for determining eligibility, rights, and remedies under the insolvency process. Initiate the insolvency process under the IBC, creditors must follow specific steps. These include identifying default, delivering a demand notice, and providing documentary evidence. The process is designed to ensure that only genuine cases proceed, protecting both creditors and debtors from frivolous or malicious claims. The code's structured approach promotes efficiency and fairness in resolving insolvency. IBC provides mechanisms for resolving disputes between creditors and debtors. Genuine disputes must be considered by the adjudicating authority, ensuring that only valid claims proceed. Arbitration and other proceedings are suspended during moratorium, focusing efforts on insolvency resolution. These mechanisms promote orderly and effective resolution, minimizing conflicts and delays. Supreme Court has played a pivotal role in interpreting and shaping the IBC. Through landmark judgments, the court has clarified procedural requirements, eligibility criteria, and the scope of various provisions. These interpretations ensure that the code remains effective, fair, and adaptable to changing circumstances. The court's guidance is essential for maintaining consistency and integrity in insolvency proceedings. IBC is a relatively new code and continues to evolve through judicial interpretations and regulatory updates. Changes such as the reduction in voting share requirements and clarifications on procedural timelines reflect the code's adaptability. This evolution ensures that the IBC remains relevant and effective in addressing insolvency challenges in India's dynamic business environment. IBC provides protection for honest debtors, ensuring that inability to pay does not lead to imprisonment. The code distinguishes between genuine insolvency and fraudulent behavior, penalizing only the latter. This approach encourages transparency and accountability while safeguarding the rights of those facing financial difficulties. The protection ensures that the insolvency process is humane and just. Fraudulent actions related to debts, such as using fake documents or misusing funds, are prosecuted under criminal law. The IBC ensures that only genuine cases of insolvency are addressed, while fraud is penalized separately. This distinction maintains the integrity of the insolvency process and deters misconduct. Accountability for fraud is essential for protecting creditor interests and upholding justice. Timelines such as the 270-day limit for completion of the insolvency resolution process are mandatory under the IBC. Courts have clarified that these limits cannot be extended, ensuring timely resolution. Procedural timelines for rectifying defects or admitting applications are directory, allowing flexibility. This balance between strict and flexible timelines promotes efficiency and fairness in insolvency proceedings. Voting share required for approving resolution plans has changed over time, from 75% to 66%. This adjustment reflects the evolving nature of the IBC and the need for practical solutions. The change ensures that resolution plans can be approved by a substantial majority, promoting consensus and effective outcomes. Compliance with voting share requirements is essential for the legitimacy of the process. RBI circulars play an important role in interpreting and implementing the IBC. Courts have referenced these circulars to clarify voting share requirements and other procedural aspects. The integration of regulatory guidance ensures that the code remains aligned with broader financial policies and practices. This collaboration between judiciary and regulators enhances the effectiveness of insolvency resolution. IBC encourages settlements between debtors and creditors, allowing for flexible outcomes. Courts have recognized the validity of settlements even after resolution plans are proposed, provided procedural requirements are met. Settlement mechanisms promote fair and efficient resolution, reducing litigation and fostering cooperation. The code's emphasis on settlement reflects its goal of balancing interests and achieving practical solutions. Withdrawal of insolvency applications is subject to strict procedural rules. Once certain stages are reached, such as the invitation for expression of interest, withdrawal may not be permitted. Courts have emphasized the importance of compliance with these rules to maintain the integrity of the process. Withdrawal limitations ensure that proceedings are not disrupted by last-minute changes, promoting stability and predictability. Resolution professionals are accountable for their performance, but mere dissatisfaction does not amount to misconduct. Adjudicating authorities can replace RPs if not satisfied, ensuring flexibility and maintaining process integrity. This accountability encourages professionalism and high standards, while allowing for changes when necessary. The role of RPs is critical in managing insolvency proceedings effectively. Criminal proceedings, such as those under Section 138 of the NI Act, are excluded from the scope of the IBC's moratorium. This ensures that criminal liability is addressed separately, without interfering with insolvency resolution. The distinction protects the rights of creditors and maintains the integrity of both criminal and insolvency processes. Exclusion of criminal proceedings prevents misuse of the moratorium for avoiding legal consequences. Admission process for insolvency applications is streamlined to focus on eligibility rather than speculative outcomes. Authorities are not required to consider the possibility of resolution or whether the company can remain a going concern at the admission stage. This approach promotes efficiency and ensures that applications are processed without unnecessary delays. Streamlining the process helps maintain momentum in insolvency proceedings. Stage of ineligibility for resolution applicants attaches when the resolution plan is submitted, not at earlier stages. This ensures that only eligible applicants participate in the process, maintaining fairness and integrity. The mandatory 270-day time limit for completion of the process prevents indefinite delays and promotes timely outcomes. Submission rules are critical for ensuring effective resolution. Committee of Creditors has absolute power to replace interim resolution professionals, provided procedural requirements are met. This includes passing a resolution with at least 66% voting shares and obtaining written consent from the proposed RP. The clarity of COSI powers ensures transparency and accountability in managing insolvency proceedings. Empowering creditors promotes effective decision-making. Procedural safeguards in the IBC protect the interests of all parties. Directory timelines, eligibility criteria, and documentary requirements ensure that only genuine cases proceed. These safeguards promote fairness, transparency, and efficiency, maintaining the integrity of the insolvency process. The Code's emphasis on procedural safeguards reflects its commitment to justice and practical outcomes. Judicial interpretation has been crucial in shaping the IBC. Courts have clarified ambiguous provisions, resolved conflicts, and ensured that the Code is applied consistently. These interpretations provide guidance for practitioners, regulators, and stakeholders, promoting confidence in the insolvency process. The evolving nature of judicial interpretation ensures that the IBC remains responsive to new challenges. Throughout this video, we have explored key judgments that have shaped the interpretation and application of the IBC. From procedural flexibility to eligibility criteria, and from settlement mechanisms to the role of the Committee of Creditors, these rulings provide a comprehensive understanding of insolvency law in India. The judgments ensure that the Code remains effective, fair, and adaptable, protecting the interests of all stakeholders. Conclusion: the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is a dynamic and evolving framework that balances the interests of debtors and creditors. Judicial interpretations and regulatory updates have clarified its provisions, ensuring procedural flexibility, accountability, and fairness. The Code's emphasis on timely resolution, protection for honest debtors, and accountability for fraud makes it a cornerstone of India's financial and legal landscape. Understanding these key judgments and procedures is essential for anyone involved in insolvency matters. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the IBC.